reading Flute Dream by Herman Hesse in the collection of short stories titled Strange News from Another Star. "Here," my father said, handing me a small ivory flute. "Take this, and don't forget your old father when you're entertaining people in foreign lands with your playing. It is now high time for you to see the world and gain knowledge. I had this flute made just for you because you don't like any other kind of work and always want to sing. Only be sure to always choose bright, cheery songs, otherwise it would be a pity about the gift God has given you." My dear father understood little about music. He was a scholar after all. He thought all I had to do was blow into the pretty little flute, and that would be that. I did not wish to undeceive him, and so I gave him my blessings. I put the flute in my pocket, and I took my departure. Our valley was familiar to me only as far as the big farm mill, and so beyond that the world began, and it pleased me greatly. A bee, tired from flying about, had lighted on my sleeve. I took her with me so that later on my first resting place I would have a messenger ready to send back home with my greetings. Woods and meadows accompanied me on my way, and the river ran merrily beside me. I saw that the world was little different from my home. The trees and flowers, the ears of corn, the hazel bushes spoke to me. I sang their songs with them, and they understood me just as at home. The singing wakened my bee. She crept slowly up to my shoulder, flew off and circled twice around me with her deep, sweet buzzing, then steered straight as an arrow back toward home. Presently a young girl came strolling out of the woods, carrying a basket on her arm and wearing a broad shade hat of straw on her blonde head. "Gruss Gott," I said to her. "Where are you off to?" "I'm taking the harvesters their dinner," she said, walking beside me. "And where are you going today?" "I'm going out into the world. My father sent me. He thinks I ought to give concerts on the flute, but I don't really know how. I shall have to learn first." "Well now, and what can you really do? Everyone has to be able to do something after all." "Nothing special," I said. "I can sing songs." "What kind of songs do you sing?" she asked. "You know, all kinds of songs," I said. "For the morning, songs for the evening, songs for all the trees and the animals and the flowers. Now, for example, I could sing a pretty song about a young girl coming out of the woods and taking the harvesters their dinner." "Could you really? Then go ahead and sing it." "Yes, but what's your name?" I asked. "Bridget," she said. Then I sang a song about the beautiful Bridget in her straw hat and what she had in her basket, and how all the flowers stared at her, and the blue bindweed in the garden hedge reached out after her, and all the other particulars. She paid strict attention and said it was good, and when I told her I was hungry, she raised the lid of her basket and got out a piece of bread. I took a bite of it, continuing to walk rapidly, and she said, "You mustn't run while you're eating, one thing after the other." And so we sat down in the grass, and I ate my bread, and she clasped her brown hands around her knees and stared at me. "Will you sing something else for me?" she asked when I had finished. "Of course I will. What shall it be?" "Sing about a girl whose darling ran away from her and she was sad." "No, I can't do that. I don't know what that would be like. And anyway, one ought not to be sad. I must only sing bright, cheery songs, my father said. I'll sing to you about the cuckoo bird or the butterfly." "Then you know nothing at all about love?" she asked. "About love? Oh yes, I do. That's the most beautiful thing of all." I began at once and sang about the sunbeam that has fallen in love with the red poppy blossoms, how it sports them and is filled with joy, and about the female finch when she's waiting for the male, and when he comes, she flies away and pretends to be terrified. I sang further about the girl with brown eyes, about the youth who comes along and sings, and is rewarded with a piece of bread. But now he does not want any more bread. He wants a kiss from the girl, and he wants to look into her brown eyes, and he will go on singing and will not stop until she begins to smile and shuts his mouth with her lips. Then Bridget bent over and shut my mouth with her lips, closed her eyes, and then opened them again. And I looked into the close-up brown golden stars in which I saw myself, and a few white meadow flowers reflected. "The world is very beautiful," I said. "My father was quite right. Now I will help you carry your basket, and we will take it to your people." I picked up her basket, and we walked on, her footsteps ringing with mine, and her merriment matching my own, and the forest whispering gently and coolly from the mountain heights. I had never wandered with so much joy. I continued to sing gaily for a while until I had to stop from sheer superabundance. There were too many songs coming from the valley and mountain, from grass and trees and rivers and underbrush, all the whisperings and the stories. Then I had to reflect. If I could simultaneously understand and sing all these thousands of songs of the world, about the grass and flowers and people and clouds and about everything, the leafy forests, the pine forests, all the animals, and also about the distant seas and mountains and stars and moon. And if all this could resound and sing inside me at once, then I would be God Almighty, and each new song would take its place in the sky as a star. But while I was thinking this, perfectly still inside, filled with wonder because such a thing had never come into my mind before, Bridget stopped and held me back by the hand of the basket. "Now I must go up this way," she said. "Our people are up there in the field, and you, where are you going? Will you come with me?" "No, I cannot come with you. I must go out into the world. My best thanks for the bread, Bridget, and for the kiss. I will think of you." She took her dinner basket, and across it she once more bent her eyes upon me in the brown shadow. Her lips clung to mine, and her kiss was so sweet and good that I almost grew sad from sheer gladness. Then I hastily called farewell and walked quickly off down the road. The girl climbed slowly up the mountainside, and under the hanging foliage of the beech trees at the forest's edge, she stopped and gazed after me. And when I signaled to her, waving my hat over my head, she nodded once and disappeared into the shadow of the beeches, as silent as a picture. I, however, went on my way, absorbed in my own thoughts, until the road turned a corner. There stood a mill, and beside the mill a boat lay in the water, and in it sat a solitary man who seemed to have been waiting just for me. For as I touched my hat to him and climbed aboard, the boat immediately began to move and ran downstream. I sat amidship, and the man sat in the stern at the helm. And when I asked him where we were going, he raised his head and stared at me with veiled gray eyes. "Wherever you like," he said in a low tone. "Downstream and into the ocean, or to the great cities, you have your choice. It all belongs to me." "It all belongs to you? Then you are the king." "Perhaps," he said. "And you are a poet, it seems. Then sing me a song as we travel." I pulled myself together. Fear filled me because of the solemn gray man and because of our boat moving so fast and silently down the river. I sang about the river, which carries boats and mirrors the sun and boils up on the rocky shores and is happy when it completes its wanderings. The man's face remained expressionless, and when I stopped singing, he nodded as silent as a dreamer. And then all at once, to my astonishment, he began to sing himself. He too sang of the river's journey through the valleys, and his song was more beautiful and more powerful than mine. But in everything sounded quite different. The river, as he sang it, rushed down from the hills like a roistering vandal, dark and wild, with gnashing teeth, fought against the constraint of mills and arching bridges. It loathed every boat it had to carry, and in its waves and long green water weed, it smilingly cradled the white corpses of the drowned. All this pleased me not at all, and yet the sound of it was so beautiful and mysterious that I became wholly confused and fell silent in my distress. If what this subtle, clever old bard was singing in his muted voice was true, then all my songs were only nonsense and silly child's play. The world at the bottom was not good and bright like God's own heart, but dark and desperate, evil and somber. And when the woods rustled, it was not from joy, but from pain. We voyaged on, the shadows lengthened, and each time I began to sing, it sounded less assured, and my voice grew fainter. And each time the strange singer would answer me with a song that made the world ever more enigmatic and sorrowful, and me ever more oppressed and sad. My soul ached. I lamented not having stayed on the shore with the flowers, or with the beautiful Bridget. And to console myself in the growing dusk, I began to sing again in a loud voice, and I sang amid the red glow of the evening the song of Bridget and her kisses. Then twilight came, and I fell silent, and the man at the helm sang, and he too sang of love, and the pleasure of love, of brown eyes and blue eyes, of moist red lips, and his impassionate singing about the darkling flood was beautiful and moving. But in his song, love too had become dark and terrifying, and a deadly mystery for which men groped, mad and bleeding in their misery, and with which they tortured and killed one another. I gave ear and grew as weary and troubled as though I had already been underway for years and had traveled through nothing but sorrow and misery. I felt a constant, faint, chilly stream of sorrow and anguish creeping across to me from the stranger and into my heart. Well, then life is not the highest and best, I cried, at last, bitterly, but death is. Then I beseech you, sorrowful king, sing me a song of death. The man at the helm now sang of death, and his singing was more beautiful than anything I had ever heard. But even death was not the highest and best. Even in death there was no comfort. Death was life, and life was death, and they were locked together in an eternal, mad love battle, and this was the final word, and the meaning of the world. And thence came a radiance that could glorify all misery, and thence came a shadow that troubled all joy and beauty, and shrouded them in darkness. But from out of this darkness, joy burned more intimately and more beautifully, and love had a deeper glow within this night. I listened and had become perfectly still. There was no more will in me save that of this strange man. His glance rested on me calmly, and with a certain sad kindness. His gray eyes were full of the sorrow and the beauty of the world. He smiled at me, and then I took heart and pleaded in my misery, "Oh, let us put about. I am fearful here in the dark, and I want to turn back and go where I can find Bridget or my home or my father." The man stood up and pointed into the night, and the lantern shone bright on his thin, determined face. "There is no way back," he said solemnly and gently. "One must continue to go forward, if one wants to fathom the world, and you have already had what is best and finest from the girl with the brown eyes. The further you are from her, the better and finer it will be. But no matter, sail on wherever you wish. I will give you my place at the helm. I was in deathly despair, and yet I saw that he was right. Full of yearning, I thought of Bridget, of my home, and of everything that had so recently been near and bright and my own, and that I had now lost. But now I must take the stranger's place and man the helm, so it must be. Therefore I got up in silence and stepped through the boat toward the pilot's seat, and the man came toward me silently. As we were passing, he looked fixedly into my face and handed me his lantern. But when I was seated at the helm and had placed the lantern beside me, I was alone in the boat. I had recognized with a deep shudder that the man had disappeared, and yet I was not surprised. I had had a premonition. It seemed to me that the beautiful day of wandering and Bridget and my father and my homeland had been only dreams, and I was old and sorrowful and had already been voyaging forever and ever on this nocturnal river. I knew that I must not call the man, and recognition of the truth came over me like a cold chill. To make sure of what I already suspected, I leaned out over the water and lifted the lantern. And out of the black watery mirror, a face peered up at me, a face with severe and solemn features and gray eyes, an old knowing face, and it was I. And since no way led back, I voyaged forth over the dark waters, deeper into the night.